I've seen companies that where the IT function reports to engineering, like a VP of engineering, marketing, or this is red flag number one for me is the COO. IT reporting to head of operations. I mean, I think it's absurd,
Outrageous,
foolish,
ludicrous,
wacko,
preposterous,
crazy,
irrational. I'm telling you,
harebrained.
this is the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life.
You
I
see
don't
it
even
everywhere.
understand
I feel
how
like I can go
companies
to
can make
15
money
companies and I'm
and
going to
feel
see the exact
secure
same thing.
about how
And then we got
their
to stop the
business is
madness.
going
We
to
just got
run.
to stop the
It
madness, and it's going to stop it.
absolutely makes no sense.
Hey, welcome back to the CIO Lifeline podcast. I'm your host, Tony Darden. With me, as always, Tom Doran. Tom, how are we doing today?
Doing great, Tony. Glad to be back. What are we talking about today?
Today's topic is IT reporting structure for a new era. And it focuses on IT leadership and who they report to. And last week you touched upon what seems to be the common theme that still exists today. So why don't you remind us and take us back to memory lane here?
Sure. So, I guess the advantage of just sticking around a while, you happen to notice things. But somebody started talking about reporting structures, and it was really one of our colleagues that was on a CIO path, and they said, "Why does everybody report to the CFO?" And when we started to unravel it, the light went on because I hadn't actually thought of it that much. Well, the fact is, when all this started, these were accounting systems. There were other than in the largest companies who might have had an IT department to run their mainframes. Regular companies didn't have IT people. They didn't have IT departments, and these things were there to do a general ledger, most likely accounts receivable, and then they evolved into inventory and sales and invoicing and all the other things that ultimately became ERP systems. But the reporting structure has remained.
And I've been exposed to many different organizations, and it is an overwhelming theme. Even if you're a director of IT or VP IT, that's where I think it's not exclusively the reporting to a CFO, but it's damn near close. Versus if you are a CIO in your organization, I feel like that reporting up to the CEO is a little more common, but the CFO leadership ladder is still prevalent. And you bring up a good point because this does go back to when these were just accounting systems, and I talked about it before too, the intimidation factor that comes with IT. Not that, I mean, it's okay if your boss is not kind of IT aware or can follow along. I think it's rooted too in how leaders present themselves and the conversation to their boss. Because not to
Can
be
I tell you?
stereotypical, but sometimes it's easy to talk over someone, right?
Right? Can I tell you a story? Because this is why I think
Of
it
course.
is honest. There's a little boy and he's talking to his mom and they're getting ready to go to grandma's for Easter. They are so excited. He's like, "Oh my God, I love grandma's at Easter." Mommy says, "What do you like best?" He says, "I like the ham the best." He said, "Mommy, why do you suppose grandma makes the best ham?" And they're talking all the reasons. He said, "I think it's because we cut the ends off," because his mother was cutting the ends off of the ham and putting the ham in the oven. And he said, "Mommy, why do we cut the ends off?" And she said, I don't know why we cut the ends off. The next time we go to grandma's at Easter, we're gonna ask her why she cuts the ends off and why it makes it so good." And so they show up at Easter and they're all excited and they're, Grammy, we have a question. Why do you cut the ends off of the ham? And the grandmother starts laughing and she says, "Honey, my pan is only this big." And the point is, we're do it because that's how we've always done it, and nobody's really taken the time to look and see just how much the landscape has changed and the significance of IT throughout the organization.
So I'm going to share a colleague story. And so this isn't just hearsay. This is a personal experience. As an IT leader, we're looking to elevate the role within our organization. Can you take a look at this job description? Absolutely. And I saw, that it didn't title it yet. It was just more, here's what the job description is, and we're going to figure out what that title is, which, that's fine. And they wanted a rock star. I mean, these are words in this. They wanted a rock star, a visionary, an IT leader to take the company into the future, embrace the digital transformation, be a partner to the business. I love that phrase. I overuse it sometimes. So it's striking all the right chords. And it had all the tactical breakdowns. But I read this, I'm like, man, I think this company gets it. I said, okay, so does he report to the CEO? All right. CFO, right? Because it must be the CFO. Wrong again. Well, who does this person report to? He said the vice president of engineering. All right. So, and I said, well, what's this person's title? He said VP of IT. I said, so you have a VP reporting to a VP. All right.
Like banking.
At that point, I'm like, look, I'm not going to recommend anyone. And we talked a little bit about what the comp package is that he assumed, and the more we talked, I said, you're looking at more for a director role, but I'm not even ready to recommend someone for you, because this is I don't think you get IT. I mean, the words show it, but you want to have an IT person report to the VP of engineering. When you said no to the CEO, I just went right to CFO, because there's a long history of that. I mean, but you go right to engineering. I mean, what are you missing? He's like, well, that was just what that's what the board was ready to accept. I'm like, you got work to do, because you're setting this up to fail, in my opinion.
I agree with you.
What's kind of weird to me too is I tend to have spirited debates on this topic. And when I talk to other C-suite individuals, sometimes the conversation goes to like, why am I so focused on this? Like, why is this a big deal? Do you care about the title, or do you care about the job you're doing? And then I'm like, yeah, all of it. So I turn around, I'm like, so in one of these conversations was with a CFO. I'm like, would you go? You're a CFO, right? So you're a finance leader. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been to a company and they said, "Hey, this is great. You're just what we want. I've been looking for a finance leader. I'm going to have you report to marketing." They go right to, you're trying to make a point here, but think about that, because even me saying that about the CFO is ridiculous in my head. Like, of course the CFO reports to the CEO. Man, if we could just get that same mindset applied to IT leadership.
Again, it's back to the grandma's ham story. So I know it sounded facetious, but when you think about corporate organizational structure,
Mhm.
most of this theory and structure has been around for 80 years anyway,
Mhm.
right? Well, 80 years ago, nobody had computers.
Yeah.
They didn't have any of this. And so the idea that there would even be a C-level position for a computer guy, I mean, they were technicians, for God's sakes. They weren't strategic people, right?
Yeah.
They were just trying to keep the big mainframe running. Well, now think about the phrases you hear, right? The title of this session is The Reporting Structure for a New Era. It is a new era. it's frankly not even all that new. The past 20 years at least should have explained to companies, hey, there's a new significance to IT, whether that's e-commerce or EDI or connecting and selling our products through a distributed supply chain throughout the world. All of those things are absolutely dependent upon rock solid IT infrastructure. And in order to create a vision and execute that vision, uh, I believe you need a C-level executive, properly structured.
My grandparents used to complain about video games and how we were, you know, into all this technology. And back when they were kids, they were outside throwing a ball around or doing something else. I'm like, not my fault. All the cool was invented now. I mean, you did that because that's all you could do back then, right? Now, I mean, I'm not anti-exercise and being out and getting vitamin D in the sun, right? But you see the point is you had tube TV and two channels. Now we have high def TV and you have 8,000 social media platforms. I mean, it's a different world. Um,
Mhm.
but I love your point. I mean, it's the new era, but really, we could have been talking about this 20 years ago. That's why I mean this function is lagging behind when it comes to its position within an organization.
Well, and it speaks to your point about how people present themselves because it's only, in my opinion, been maybe the last 15 years, say, where you started to see more professional IT leaders, people like yourselves, right? You got a solid, your ones and zeros are as good as anybody's, right?
Mhm.
But you also have an MBA. You also understand a little bit about finance. You know, understand a little bit about marketing. You understand a little bit about the broader aspects of business.
Yeah.
In the early days, these were just really clever, kids that figured out how to, make a pretty page on a website when nobody else could figure out what HTML was doing. And, they were revolutionizing business. I mean, Mark Cuban, for God's sakes, I mean, that's about the best story ever. And other than his business degree, I mean, I'm not certain there's anybody with a less IT sort of background than that guy. And he blew it up in the .com, right?
Yes, you did. And like last week, talking about some of the best CIOs I know were not IT folks. They had a business brain of
Right.
them and could hire the right people. Because, and I've said this too. If I'm the smartest guy around the table, if I'm looking at my team, I did something wrong. The best teams are the ones that succeed. As an org overall. So I mean, I think the advice we're saying here is if you're in a current role and the reporting structure is not how you aspire it to be or want it to be. But if you're looking for that next chapter in your life, and if it's not reporting to the CEO, and we'll even give the CFO a pass here. I mean, because again, I've been fortunate. I've had many different CFOs as bosses in the past, and I've been fortunate. But there's another word for fortunate, and that's lucky, because you don't always control that fate. I just been lucky that I've had you know, I'll say IT competent CFOs. But if you're looking for that next leap, and if it's not one or the other, and it's some other, uh, you know, if it's like to the engineering or the COO or something like that, I say you pass. It's a sign of other heartburn to come. Clear indicator that the C suite has no idea or appreciation of IT. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, but it's back to, well, you're just a technical arm of the department. You're purely support.
But Tony, you made a remark a few minutes ago, and I'll bring it up again. You said, "How do you present yourself within the organization?" Right.
Mhm.
So, elevating any role to a C-level position is an investment by the business. So, as an aspiring or ascendant IT leader, I guess my challenge would be to just honestly reflect and more than reflect, take an inventory of what are the business impacts that you have had tangible ROI? And then how would you guide the organization strategically with IT? And what does that ROI look like? Because now we're having a business conversation, right? This isn't about do you get to fund the next server or move to Azure or whatever. This is about do you get a seat at the table? Do you get to participate in all the conversations so that you can better advise and lead from an IT perspective?
Yeah. It's just assumed companies have a CFO. It's just assumed that companies have a COO or senior VP of operation, right? So again, we want that same assumption for IT. But let's just so for those that are in roles where this is resonating and you're looking for ways to elevate or be recognized as a C-suite contender, um, everything you said was spot on. It's how you present yourself. It's the projects you engage in. It's the business cases you bring to the table with projects like this. But you also want to be mindful of the risk of message dilution because if you don't have a direct ear, the CEO's direct ear, are you confident in your boss's communication about what you're doing? I don't know. I mean, sounds rather blunt, but
Or
is
the ability to sell your idea, right?
yeah, yeah,
You're-
agreed. Yeah, and again, I've been fortunate and throughout my career to have CFOs have been not only IT competent, but also a cheerleader. You know, for me, they recognize the folks around them, and I had one say, "Look, I'll fight to the death for you. I just want you have my back too." And that's not a behind closed doors nefarious thing to say. What he's saying is we support each other and we fight for each other, and but we may agree to disagree, but when we walk out of the room, no matter which way that decision goes, we're in alignment. A couple thoughts here. If you're in that position and you don't have that visibility that you would like, I think there's two ideas to float here. One is can you get a step meeting with your CEO? Just a 10-15 minute check in. It could be every other week just to say, hey, just to kind of debrief on what's going on. I would think some CFOs would be very receptive to that. Now, if you think that's not an option, or it might be looked at as negative impression on your boss, raise the idea of a steering committee. An IT steering committee, I think, is a powerful thing to have in any organization because you're bringing together the stakeholders of your company to talk about strategic initiatives, set business goals for the year, and how IT can help accomplish those goals or exceed those goals. And you're guaranteed to have the right audience in the room. CEO is certainly part of this, but all your key leaders. And it gives a chance for you to not only sell yourself, and I got to be careful, this it can't just be about you per se, but more or less the IT function, which you're leading. So it does come back around, but I think you don't get a better chance at that visibility and how and letting them see the business side of you.
Well, and I would further suggest, and I think you alluded to this, but I'd just be specific. Regardless of what your current direct report manager is right now, my suggestion is an honest conversation, not adversarial, aspirational. If Tony was my boss, when it was time for my review, or if we don't do reviews regularly, I'd say, "Hey, Tony, can we grab a cup of coffee? I just need 15 minutes." And I'd lay it out. I'm really having a great time in my job. I'm enjoying working with you, and I'm hoping maybe you can help me. Most people want to help, right? One of my goals in my career is to be a fill in the blank. In this case, a CIO. What do you see as the things I need to do in order to earn the right to have that conversation here at XYZ company?
And it's a good opportunity to show how you take constructive criticism, how you take ideas, because this isn't, I mean, business isn't a world where everybody agrees and it's all, happy go lucky, right? Now, I always tend to think 10 steps ahead here, and so what if you don't like what you hear? Now we're kind of back to what are some of the ways you can help create that visibility.
Well, or if you really don't like what you hear, then the next meeting you got to have is with your bathroom mirror, and you got to ask yourself whether the feedback you got is valid,
Mhm.
because you're asking for a seat at the grown-up table, right?
Mhm.
And so we all got to be able to be enlightened professionals
Mhm.
and take the feedback, whether we like it or not, and at least try to reflect upon it and say, could this be true from my customer's experience?
And when you're looking at that reflection, think back. I mean, the successes, the wins, those are easy. Those are fun to think back on. But how you grow, how you make that next level leap is you think about where you failed. You think about when you fell down and how you reacted to it. I mean, were you looking for excuses? Were you saying it was his fault, her fault? I mean, or, you know, did you own it? Did you look to learn from those mistakes? Did another project or similar situation occur sometime later where you've demonstrated those lessons learned? In other words, history didn't repeat itself. I think that speaks a lot to, that personal journey and that honest conversation you have with yourself. Now, let's say all three of these suggestions aren't flying. Here's another part that I think where you go to next, and that is embracing the projects with your peers and other department leaders. Because those are the ones, if you do a fantastic job and you've handled adversity right, you've taken change management to a new level, because change is hard. We've talked about this before. But how did you present yourself? Was the project a success? Was it on time, on budget? And did everybody, embrace it? Or did you find yourself always having to push someone to the next stage? Think about all these things. And when you pull it off, who is that person going to report up to and communicate that message? Just another way to create that visibility within the organization when other methods may not have gone as planned, but you love your job, you love what you do, and you want to show your value.
Well, and the important thing, and I'm not here to promote turnover in any way, shape, or form, but the beauty of IT is if you love your job and you love what you do, almost every company does this. So the next question you also have to honestly ask is this still the company for me? If your next step, this is not disloyal to anybody. The company's always going to operate in the company's best interest, and you need to operate in your best interest. And so you have to reflect on, look, if it's a great family culture and everybody feels appreciated, and you actually have friends at work, and there's community there, hey, that has a lot of value in a title. Maybe you really got to weigh the value of that.
I
But
always said if the moment you start looking at what you do as a job and not as a career, that's a red flag. In the worst case, if all else fails, look at it as you're honing your skills. I mean, I think everybody has a limit, everybody has a number, and the days of 40-year careers are rare. It's not like the days of my grandfather and my parents where you put 40 years in a company, you have a pension and health insurance, life goes on. And especially with the younger gen, if I can pick on them for a minute, it's the job hop frequency is a little more prevalent. And maybe it's just society as a whole. Maybe I'm being unfair to um, to the younger gen, but it's you need to make the most of your situation in a positive light, because if you let anger take over or frustration, and I mean you've you've now cemented who you are within that organization's leadership, within that peer group, as not going to serve you well in the future. And if I, like when I was my first job was with a family owned business, and I reported up to an IT director, and it was frustrating for me because I just felt like, maybe it was just me being, the cocky 20 something, that I'm like, man, I know more than this person. I've had to redo her all the time. And it just becomes, and I see how she talks to other folks. They get frustrated. And then when people come to me directly, she's teeing off on me as if I'm telling them to come to me. I mean, it was a frustrating time. But at some point the light bulb went off and I said, no, wait a minute. This is a lesson on how not to lead. This is a lesson. And when you watch how employees react, they gravitate to folks for a reason. And it can't always be because you're going to do them a favor, or, you had a round of golf with them and you're going to shoot the shit for 10 minutes. Like there's business productivity reasons how people react with other people. So you see, when I sit back and look at that chapter in my life, the lessons I've learned on how to be a leader and what can torque someone the wrong way, what is motivating the other way. I mean, there is no situation in any job you're at. I don't care if it's McDonald's or, McCormick. There is a way to take and make the best of that situation that's going to serve you, for the rest of your career.
That's absolutely right. And at the end of the day, whatever you're going to do, you're probably going to do it for quite some time. And so it's important to get happy. And happiness is an inside job for sure.
And I hate to go here again, Tom, but I'm going to. I'm going to say actions speak louder than words. Because we talk about all the philosophical, hey, we're going to do things for the right reason. But at the end of the day, you got to get some traction, right? You got to land where you want to land. And we're all about progression.
Well, you got to put points up first, right?
You
I
do
mean,
got to, that's right.
everybody wants progression, but I thought you were headed someplace different. It's like you got to put points on the board, and
Yeah.
then you can.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to go where you think I'm going to.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
But it's a great precursor because you just can't come in hot. You gotta have something to back it up. And I don't mean, 4 months of good work. I'm talking about you're in a career and you've had multiple years of success and relationship building, so on and so forth, right? You've made your mark as far as project work, productivity, business partnership, business enablement. You have it. You have a great resume, right? Actions speak louder than words. So if you're being told, we think you're valuable, that's why you're on the strategy team. That's why you're on, anytime there's a project coming on, we pull you in. Like if you're playing all the parts and all the roles, don't give up on being recognized for this. And by recognition, it's different for other people. For some, it's comp. That was the other part where I was going to go. But it's also, how you're positioned in the company. To me, it's a slippery slope here, is because I've been a part of structures where you have your CEO, you have your CFO, and then you have VPs and general managers throughout the organization. And I was in a tough spot where I was serving 10 masters, where it was this GM that I was beholden to their decisions. This GM. So you're trying to implement standards. They wanted IT synergies, standards. It's just, you can support better. We're all singing the same tune. We're all reporting up the same way, and in databases and dashboards. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that whole synergy conversation. But if so and so GM wants to do it a different way, you're here to support him. That's a tough
Mhm.
that's a tough position to be in, because you're not going to perform as well as you can, because again, you have all these different masters.
Certainly, you see it from time to time, and it's challenging. Whenever you're having to serve multiple masters, that tends to be a no-win situation pretty quick. And so, how you navigate those, I think, is still falls back to all the tools and tips that we've been sharing along the way, right? Make sure, because these things either it sort of goes one of two ways. It either builds a case for a long and happy career where you're at, or it builds a resume for where you're going next. But in either case, you're showing up and you're doing good work every day, whether or not you think this is ultimately going to get you where you're trying to go in your current situation.
Yeah.
And and the multiple master thing. I mean, sometimes that's just it's hard to break
It is.
that.
When I joined one of the last companies I joined, part of my onboarding, I had two questions. I said, um, "Are there any sacred cows?" Because if there's some tough team choices to make, I want to make sure that, well, that's John Doe, and he's been here for 20 years, and we're gonna, he's not going anywhere, type of thing. And then, what was decision making power, because change is hard. And
Yeah.
and this is me talking to my boss. I said, and you don't know this yet, but I promise you, I'm a collaborator in chief. Um, I want it to be a joint decision when I'm working with other leaders in the organization, but there is still a decision to be made ultimately, and I'm going to make it in the best interest of the company. But I want to make sure that I'm not going to get trumped 10, 11, 12 times over, that I can actually, you know, implement a
That's
strategy.
Well, and you touched on something I hadn't even thought of, Tony, but and the latitude to pick your own team. It's like, look, guys, you're telling me you want to make the playoffs, but you're not letting me pick my own team.
Or it's a need to have 5 people on a team because you have 12 locations geographically dispersed, and a lot of initiatives, and they're saying, well, you're only going to get 3. I mean, these are things you need to get ahead of. Now, in my case, well, guess what? My boss changes. Someone new comes in, completely different strategy. So now what drew me in became something I would avoid. Um, but that's where, again, everybody's different. You gotta make the best of what you have. And sometimes, like I said, my mentor of mine used to say, you might be right, but right doesn't always win. And it's how you handle that situation that speaks to your character, and what you can do to keep your journey going.
Well, and being a good team player when it's time to be, and not politicking your position around.
Yep. Because ultimately, you want to do what's best for the organization. You want to support your CEO's vision. You want to support your boss's vision, which might not be the CEO, and help him or her be successful, and in the company as a whole, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're here to do that. Thanks again for tuning in. Great conversation as always. Be sure to join us next time when we talk about remote work and strategies we see for success. If you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button, and we will see you next time.
Goodbye, everybody. See you next time.
I am excited for today's topic, and that is IT reporting structure for a new era. And
Indeed.
it talks about sorry, go ahead. Era, let me I overtalked you. Let me
I stopped talking on purpose. Did you think I froze?
I did. No worries. I can
I'm
jump.
sorry.
No, I can
I
jump
just
in.
noticed it was good you started moving. I thought you froze. I'm sitting here going, "Oh, he'll be back in a minute." And
Let's
then I saw you moving.
let's take a step back and think about those that are.
Sorry,
No, I
that
had
was
I was
coming.
I had one too. Somehow I thwarted it. you know.
I'm
So
like, I can't. It came up halfway through my last little bit. I'm like, you got to get through this.
um, and we will see you next time.
Absolutely.
All right. I can't that up.
Sure you
All
can.
right.